The gate slammed shut behind her with a sound like a coffin lid. Not a shout, not a warning, just iron on iron, echoing across frozen ground. The air smelled of coal, smoke, and disinfectant, sharp enough to sting the throat. Somewhere behind the barracks, a man coughed a dry, hollow sound that did not end. The female doctor paused for half a second, her gloved hand tightening around her medical satchel as she realized something was wrong. This was not a hospital. This was not even a prison in the usual sense. It was something quieter, colder, and far more permanent. A German guard motioned her forward without looking at her face. She stepped inside anyway, because she had been ordered to, because men were dying, and because she did not yet know that the person who would never leave this camp was not her body but her former self. What happened to her inside would never appear in any official report, and by the time she walked back out, she was no longer the same woman who had entered. Asterisk, the year was 1942, the location. A German-controlled prisoner of war camp somewhere in occupied Europe, its name reduced to numbers in military files. Thousands of captured soldiers were held there, British, Soviet, Polishman officially protected by international law, but in reality, surviving on the edge of neglect. Disease moved faster than food. Winter arrived earlier than mercy. The doctor had not volunteered for this assignment. She was a trained physician, one of the few women allowed near frontline medical operations, sent under strict supervision to inspect the camp's medical conditions. On paper, her role was simple: assess sanitation, prevent outbreaks, keep prisoners alive just enough to remain work-capable. But from the moment she entered, it was clear that something else was at stake. The guards watched her too closely. The camp commandant asked too many questions about her methods, and the prisoners, those who could still stand, looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear, as if her presence might either save them or make things worse. By the end of her first hour, she understood the truth. Inside this camp, medical care was not about healing. It was about control. And once she understood that, there was no safe way back. Asterisk, the turning point came with a single patient. A young prisoner collapsed during roll call, his body folding into the snow as if the strength had been pulled from his bones. The guards hesitated, then waved the doctor forward. She knelt beside him, feeling a pulse so faint it seemed imaginary. Severe infection. Untreated for weeks, still alive? Barely, she ordered that he be moved to the infirmary. The commandant disagreed. The man was non-essential. Resources were limited. The doctor insisted too sharply, too publicly. For a moment, the camp went silent. Even the guards stopped moving. Then the commandant smiled. Not angrily, calmly, he allowed the transfer. That night, when she reached the infirmary, the prisoner was gone. No record. No body. Just a freshly scrubbed floor and a guard who refused to meet her eyes. That was when she realized the most dangerous thing in the camp was not disease. It was obedience. And she had already broken the rules. Asterisk, the camp did not erupt into chaos all at once. It crept there quietly like frost spreading across glass. At first, the doctor noticed it in the smallest details. A man coughing longer than he had yesterday. A latrine overflowing by evening instead of morning. A guard who no longer bothered to shout when prisoners moved too slowly. Systems were failing, but no alarm was sounded. In places like this, collapse did not announce itself. It settled in and waited. Each morning began with the same ritual. The siren wailed before dawn, slicing through sleep like a blade. Boots hit frozen ground. Prisoners assembled in lines that no longer held straight. From the doctor's perspective, watching from the infirmary doorway, the roll call looked less like discipline and more like endurance. Men swayed. Some leaned subtly against one another, sharing body heat without permission. Every time someone fell, the guards hesitated just long enough to decide whether lifting him was worth the effort. Inside the infirmary, the air was thick and stale. Disinfectant masked nothing. The smell underneath sweat, sickness, unwashed bodies, despair was permanent. Beds were full, then overfull, then no longer beds at all. Men lay on the floor with coats folded under their heads, eyes fixed on the ceiling beams, as if memorizing them. The doctor moved among them with mechanical precision, her voice calm, her hands steady. But inside, calculations never stopped. Who could be saved with what little remained? Who needed rest that would never be approved? Who would be sent back out to work, and likely not return? Every 20 minutes a new interruption. A guard demanding a man be released early. A supply crate arriving half empty. A list from the commandant's office requesting names, never reasons. Each request forced a decision. Each decision closed one door to keep another barely open. From the prisoner's perspective, her presence altered the rhythm of survival. When she entered a barrack, whispers spread faster than disease. Men hid their worst symptoms until she arrived, then revealed them all at once, afraid this might be their only chance to be seen. Some exaggerated, others minimized. She learned quickly that honesty here was not moral, it was strategic. But from the commandant's perspective, the situation looked different. He watched reports stack up neatly on his desk, numbers aligning just well enough to avoid scrutiny. Mortality was within expectations. Labor output remained acceptable. The doctor's presence complicated things. Her questions disrupted routines. Her requests created paperwork. Her insistence on standards implied failure, and failure was not tolerated. Orders began to shift subtly. No confrontation. No threats. Just changes. The infirmary's authority over patient classification was quietly reduced. Guards began escorting patients without notifying her. Work details were reassigned in the middle of treatment. When she protested, she was reminded politely that she was a guest. Guests did not set policy. Night fell early, and with it came a different kind of chaos. Coughing echoed through the barracks like a signal. Fever dreams turned men restless. Fights broke out over blankets. Somewhere beyond the wire, artillery rumbled faintly, reminding everyone that the world still existed, but not for them. The doctor wrote at night. Always at night. She kept her notes hidden beneath a loose floorboard, knowing full well that if they were found, they would be destroyed, and she might follow. She recorded patterns, not names. Symptoms, not identities. Which barracks declined fastest? Which guards interfered least? Which times of day allowed small mercies? She began training prisoners quietly. Not officially, not openly. A former medical student learned how to take a pulse properly. A pharmacist memorized dilution ratios. Another man learned how to recognize when someone was pretending to be worse than he was. And when someone was pretending to be better, this invisible network became the infirmary's backbone. If she disappeared tomorrow, she wanted knowledge to remain. That was when inspections increased. German officers from outside. The camp arrived unannounced. Clean boots. Crisp uniforms. Their presence froze everything. Guards snapped to attention. Prisoners stood straighter than their bodies allowed. The infirmary was scrubbed in hours, symptoms hidden behind discipline. The doctor was instructed to speak only when addressed. During one inspection, an officer paused beside a bed where a man lay too still. The doctor knew he was dying. The officer asked a simple question. Fit for labor? Time slowed. The doctor could feel every eye on her. Guards, prisoners, command staff. Her answer would decide more than one fate. She said no, flatly. Without explanation, the officer studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded on. Moved on. That night, the patient was transferred anyway. No explanation. No signature. Just absence. Fear changed shape after that. It became quieter, more focused. The doctor stopped reacting outwardly. She learned which battles could be won and which only produced casualties. She stopped asking for supplies that would never come and started redistributing what little remained without records. But the camp was deteriorating faster than she could adapt. Equipment broke and was not replaced. Heating failed in 2 barracks. Water froze in pipes overnight. Men arrived at the infirmary already beyond help, not because treatment was impossible, but because permission had been delayed. From the guard side, tension was rising too. They were under pressure to maintain output with diminishing resources. Orders conflicted. Discipline slipped. Some guards became crueler. Others avoided eye contact entirely. The doctor noticed which ones lingered outside the infirmary door longer than required, listening not for disobedience, but for reassurance that something human still existed inside. Then came the first unexplained lockdown. No announcement. No warning. Sirens sounded at midday. Prisoners were forced into barracks. Doors were sealed. The infirmary was cut off. The doctor stood in the corridor, hearing pounding from inside men, needing water, medication, reassurance. She was not allowed to enter. For 6 hours, nothing happened. When the doors finally reopened, 3 men were missing. No records. No explanations after that time lost meaning. Days blurred. Weeks collapsed into routines punctuated by sudden absences. The doctor began to understand the camp's true function. It was not merely to contain prisoners. It was to observe limits, physical, psychological, ethical. How much deprivation could be applied before productivity collapsed? How much fear could be introduced without provoking rebellion? How much complicity could be demanded before resistance? It felt pointless, and she was part of the experiment now. The chaos was no longer loud. It was administrative, procedural, clean, and that made it worse. Every small victory came with a cost. Saving one man meant losing another. Pushing too hard meant drawing attention. Staying silent meant becoming indistinguishable from the system itself by the end. Of this phase, though she did not know it, then the doctor no longer thought in terms of right and wrong. She thought in margins, probabilities, survival windows. She still wore the white coat. She still treated patients, but something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer about medicine. This was about enduring long, enough to remember so that one day, if anyone ever asked what happened inside these fences, there would be someone left who could answer, and even that hope was beginning to feel fragile. The breaking point did not arrive with explosions or shouting. It arrived disguised as efficiency. One morning, the doctor found a new document waiting on her desk, typed, stamped, official. It outlined revised medical protocols for the camp. Fewer exemptions, shorter recovery windows, stricter classifications. On paper, it read like administrative refinement. In reality, it erased the last margin she had been working within. She understood immediately what it meant. No more quiet delays. No more extended rest. No more gray areas. From this point forward, medicine would serve production. She folded the document carefully and placed it beneath her notes, her expression unchanged. A guard watched from the doorway, pretending not to. The message was clear. Compliance was now expected, not negotiated, within hours. The consequences began. Prisoners who had been stable the day before were declared fit by the new criteria. Men still shaking with fever were ordered to stand. One collapsed during inspection and was dragged upright again. Another was marked for transport despite barely being able to speak. Each time, the doctor felt the same tightening in her chestnut panic. Not fear, but the crushing awareness that resistance now carried a different price. From the commandant's perspective, this was progress. Reports showed improved labor allocation. Fewer ambiguities. Fewer debates. The camp, on paper, was becoming more orderly. And order in wartime was indistinguishable from success. But inside the infirmary, the doctor saw the truth unfold minute by minute. Beds emptied faster than they filled, not because patients recovered, because they were removed. Assistants whispered warnings to her between tasks. A man she had treated for weeks was reassigned and never returned. Another came back with injuries that did not match any official explanation. Patterns hardened into certainty. Then came the outbreak. It began quietly, the way all real disasters do. A fever in one barrack, then another. Men who had survived months of deprivation suddenly deteriorated in hours. Coughing turned constant. Weakness spread faster than fear. The infirmary overflowed again, but this time, even guards were affected by unease. An outbreak threatened everyone, including those in uniform. The commandant summoned the doctor personally. The meeting was brief, controlled, and chillingly polite. He wanted results, containment, numbers that would not attract outside attention. He did not ask only how fast. She explained what was medically necessary: isolation, reduced labor, proper nutrition. He listened without interrupting, then dismissed most of it with a single sentence: "We will do what is possible." She knew what that meant, back in the infirmary. She faced the most dangerous moment of her assignment, not because her life was immediately at risk, but because her choices would now determine how many others quietly disappeared. She made a decision that night. Not defiance, not obedience. Something far more complex. She activated the network she had built in secret. Prisoner assistants worked through the night, rotating care without official records. Symptoms were redistributed, severe cases hidden, mild ones presented instead. Recovery times were adjusted on paper. Names were moved. Numbers shifted. Every action carried risk. If discovered, it would not be treated as a misunderstanding. It would be sabotage. The tension became constant. Footsteps in the corridor froze conversation. Unexpected inspections sent pulses of fear through the infirmary. The doctor slept in fragments, waking to imagine knocks. Rehearsing explanations she prayed she would never have to give. From the prisoner's perspective, something strange was happening. Some were spared when they should not have been. Others vanished despite appearing stable. Survival felt less random, but also more terrifying. They understood now that being seen could be both salvation and sentence. The outbreak peaked on the 5th day. That morning, the infirmary resembled a battlefield without noise. Men lay motionless, eyes open, breathing shallow. The doctor moved continuously, her coat stained, her hands numb. At one point, she caught her reflection in a darkened window and did not recognize the woman staring back. The expression was not fear. It was calculation. That afternoon, external officers arrived. No warning. No preparation time. The commandant escorted them personally, confidence intact. The doctor was summoned to present her assessment. She knew this inspection would decide everything: her methods, her future, and the fate of those she had hidden. As they walked through the infirmary, questions came rapidly: statistics, recovery rates, labor availability. She answered evenly, truth folded carefully inside half-truths. Every word mattered. One wrong phrase could unravel weeks of quiet resistance. Then one officer stopped beside a patient the doctor had classified as recovering. The man's pulse was weak, his eyes unfocused. He should not have been standing. The officer looked at the doctor and asked calmly, "How long before return to full duty?" Time slowed again. This was the moment she would later remember, not as fear, but as clarity. She could give the safe answer, the expected one. Or she could push just far enough to protect him, knowing it might expose everything. She chose the latter. Not fit, she said. Firm, final. The officer studied her. The commandant did not intervene. After a long pause, the officer nodded and moved on. The inspection ended shortly after. That night, the doctor waited for consequences. They came not immediately, but precisely. She was informed her assignment was concluding. Her presence was no longer required. A transport was arranged. Departure scheduled within days. Officially, it was routine rotation. Unofficially, it was removal. Relief should have followed. It did not, because as she prepared to leave, she realized something devastating. Her protection had been temporary. Whatever small buffer she had provided would vanish the moment she was gone. She spent her final nights making impossible choices. Who to train? What to record? Which knowledge to pass on quickly? She burned certain notes and hid others. Knowing that memory itself had become a liability, on her last day, she walked through the infirmary one final time. Men watched her silently. No words were exchanged. None were needed. They all understood what her departure meant. As she exited the gate, the iron closing behind her once more, she felt something irreversible settle inside her. She had entered the camp as a doctor, Trying to help within the system, she left knowing the system itself was the disease, and the most disturbing realization of all was this: she had learned how to function inside it. Asterisk. The transport truck did not stop when she turned to look back. It moved forward at a steady, indifferent pace, tires grinding against frozen earth, carrying her away from the wire, the watchtowers, the infirmary, and the men whose faces she now knew better than her own reflection. No farewell, no acknowledgement. Just distance, increasing 1 meter at a time. The camp disappeared behind a line of trees, but it did not leave her. For days after her departure, she barely spoke. Other medical staff assumed exhaustion. Command officers filed her transfer as routine. No one asked what she had seen, because no one wanted an answer that would require responsibility. At night, she dreamed of lists, not faces, not suffering. Lists, names without surnames, numbers without context, decisions without justification. She woke with the sensation that she had forgotten something essential, some final task left undone inside the wire. And the worst part was knowing that the feeling was correct. She resumed her duties elsewhere, outwardly unchanged. Her reports were precise, her conduct professional, but colleagues noticed differences they could not define. She insisted on verifying conditions personally. She challenged assumptions others accepted. She refused to sign documents that reduced human beings to categories without explanation. When questioned, she never mentioned the camp. In private, she wrote, not memoirs, not accusations, observations. She wrote about how suffering could be managed instead of addressed, how cruelty could be hidden inside procedure, how systems did not need hatred to function, only obedience and silence. She wrote about the danger of doing just enough to keep things running. None of these writings were published during the war. Some were never found. Years later, after the conflict had ended and the world was eager to move forward, fragments of her notes surfaced in archives, and remarkable at first glance. No dramatic language, no direct accusations, just patterns, timelines, marginal comments, questioning official outcomes. Historians would later note something strange. She never described herself as a hero. She never claimed resistance. She never used the word evil. Instead, she wrote about adaptation, about how quickly moral lines blurred when survival depended on cooperation, about how dangerous it was to believe that being present, being helpful, being better than nothing was always enough. In one surviving letter, written years after the war, she described the moment she understood what had truly changed her. I did not leave because I was brave. I left because I was permitted to, and I have never trusted permission again. Of the prisoners she treated, few records remain. Some survived long enough to be liberated. Some did not. Their stories were scattered across testimonies, incomplete and inconsistent, blurred by time and trauma. But a recurring detail appears in several accounts. A woman doctor, quiet, observant, who looked at them as if trying to memorize their faces, not to save them all, but to remember them. The camp itself was dismantled after the war, structures burned, files destroyed or reclassified. Official investigations focused on command staff, policies, crimes that could be named and prosecuted. The quieter mechanisms, the medical compromises, the bureaucratic erosion of care, received far less attention. They were harder to explain, and perhaps harder to confront. The doctor lived a long life. She continued practicing medicine. She trained others. She never returned to the camp's location, even after it became accessible. When asked late in life why she refused interviews, she gave a simple answer: because what happened there was not extraordinary. That is what frightens me. The final question remains unanswered. Was the camp designed only to break prisoners? Or was it also designed to test how far ordinary professionals, educated, ethical, well-intentioned, could be drawn into a system before they no longer recognized themselves? She entered the camp believing medicine was neutral. She left knowing that neutrality, under control, can become a weapon. And the most chilling truth of all is this: if no one speaks about that transformation, it is always ready to happen again.